Bernie Wall here, and on this short IELTS video, I want to continue a little bit about the theme of writing, IELTS writing, and address something that if you're looking for Band 7 and 8, you have to include in your writing, and that is complex sentences. And I know from working with my students that a lot of students worry about whether they're including complex sentences or not, whether they have enough, and how to construct sentences that would be deemed complex by the examiner. So I want to give you a few ways, in fact 6 ways, of making sure that you have complex sentences in your writing. And hopefully if you work with these techniques and try out sentences using these techniques, then you will be certain to have enough complex sentences in your writing to achieve Band 7 and 8. So I'm going to share a short presentation, and I'll just get that up now, and then we'll have a look at how you can include complex sentences. So these are obligatory, they are in the band descriptors, and they are something that you must include in both your task 1 and task 2. But in particular in task 2 you have more scope for including quite a lot of them. So let's consider what a complex sentence is. Okay, so there are complex sentences and there are also simple sentences, which are generally shorter, but not necessarily, and obviously less complicated. So a simple definition is 2 or 3 clauses which are joined together with some sort of linking device. And there are many different types of linking device, and I'll show you those as we go through. They don't necessarily have to be long sentences. So a complex sentence, although it can be quite long, doesn't necessarily have to be long. So just because you write a sentence over 2-3 lines, it doesn't necessarily make it complex. But usually they are more interesting, and they contain quite a lot of information in a fairly economic way. And they have to be combined with simple sentences for the best writing. If you had a whole task 2 which was nothing but complex sentences, I think you'd find it rather tiring to read. So the best writing is a good mix of simple and complex. So the very easiest way to make a complex sentence is a compound sentence, which is essentially taking 2 sentences and joining them together with a simple linking device, such as and, but, so, yet, etc. And here's an example. Now notice that pollution is repeated. It's repeated in the second sentence. And wherever you write 2 sentences and you're repeating the main topic, it should signal to you that there must be a way of combining these sentences to avoid that repetition. And here we can use yet. So pollution is destroying the environment, yet nobody does anything about it. So our second pollution is now a pronoun. So look out for those sentences where you're repeating the same words and find a way to combine them to avoid that repetition. Okay. A second way is a subordinate clause. Now, subordinate gives the idea of less important, and that's really in a way what it is. So you have one clause which is wholly dependent upon another one. And the linking words here are things like although, unless, whereas, and that defines the relationship between the 2 clauses. So here's an example. People don't speak up about the problem of litter. The council continues to ignore the problem of litter. So what we're trying to get across here is that the reason that the council ignores the problem is because people are not speaking up. So we can use unless. Unless people speak up about the problem of litter, the council will continue to ignore it. And here, unless is a negative, so we can remove the negative from the original sentence. You could also use if. If people do not speak up about litter, the council will continue to ignore it. So one clause is dependent upon the other. So these people are not speaking up, and therefore the problem continues. And you can play with different ways of combining the ideas. Okay, notice that you will need a comma after the first clause. So that's quite important, and don't forget. Okay, a third way is to use a gerund or a participle, which is basically an ing form. So if it's a gerund, it behaves like a noun. If it's a participle, it's a type of verb. And you'll notice that in formal writing, so if you look at some of the models for Task 2 and possibly even Task 1 as well, that you will find these ing forms. So they're quite an economical way again, and a sophisticated way of creating complex sentences. Traffic causes too much pollution in our cities. As a result of pollution is an increase, a result of pollution is an increase in cases of asthma among children. So two sort of divergent ideas of pollution and then a cause of that pollution. So what you need to do is to combine these to show that they are connected. And a gerund or participle is one way. You could use which results in, but the participle, I think, makes a nicer sentence. So traffic causes too much pollution in cities, resulting in an increase. You could turn it around and say increasing cases of childhood asthma are caused by too much traffic pollution. So there are different ways of doing it. And the thing is to try and experiment with different ways of introducing these participles and gerunds. And you only really need to put one or two into your writing. Don't do it for every sentence, or that will become quite boring and repetitive. Okay. A fourth way is a conditional sentence, and that's a sentence using if. And there are three types, typically called first, second, and third conditional. They have other names, future, past, etc. The grammar is a little complex on these, so it may be something you need to check. And if you saw my video a couple of weeks ago about the books that you need for IELTS preparation, you'll see that one of the things I suggested you ought to have is access to a grammar resource. And if you look up conditional sentences in your grammar book or your online grammar resource, you'll find information about how to construct the sentences and how they are used. So I've highlighted here the main things. So in this first conditional, which is usually about now and the future, we use present simple. So you can see we've got continue here in the if clause. So the bit that has the if is called the if clause. So we use present simple, and then in the second clause, we use will plus an infinitive. So that's basically the grammar. If plus present tense plus will plus infinitive. And this is to talk about situations that do change or don't change. Here it's something that won't change, and therefore there's going to be a problem caused by it. Second conditionals are more about speculation. And here we've got if plus past simple plus would plus past participle, and here we've made it passive because we don't know the agent of solving. So again, if you look up second conditional, then you'll find the grammar for this type of sentence. And the key thing about this type of sentence is that it's improbable, or in some cases impossible. For example, if I were you. Here it's improbable. We think that the government probably won't invest the money, therefore the problem won't be solved quickly. So depending on what you want to say, you choose the correct conditional. Now, the third conditional is grammatically a little bit more complex. It's probably less likely that you'll use third conditional because it's quite specific. It talks about an impossible situation because it's something that has already happened and therefore cannot be changed. So if the country had not promoted intensive farming, famine would not have been so widespread. So it's too late to change this. That is why it's probably less likely that you'll be using third conditional. But there may be a case for using it, and it does produce a really nice complex sentence. So if here plus past perfect plus would plus present perfect, and in this case it's negative. So if you want to use the conditionals, I would urge you to just check the grammar, check the meanings, but if you are able to use them, then it will give you a really good ready-made complex sentence. Okay, let's move on to number 5, relative clauses. So these are clauses which have a relationship with each other. And generally speaking, the second clause will give you extra information about the first one. And for that, we use things like who, what, where, that, etc. So here's an example. Fast food is very popular throughout the world. Fast food is cheap to buy. So notice again, we've got this repetition of fast food. And this is something that we want to avoid if you're looking at band 7, 8 in IELTS Task 2 writing and Task 1 too. So we want to avoid this repetition. So here we can use that. One reason for fast food being popular is that it's cheap to buy. Here's another one. Obesity, and it's a problem. And again, we've got repetition of obesity. So in order to take away that repetition, we can use which. So you can see now what you've got a much more interesting sentence and a much more sophisticated sentence. So obesity can lead to many serious diseases, which is why it is a huge problem. Or you could do it this way. Obesity, which can result in many serious diseases, notice the commas there, is a huge problem in the world today. So again, experiment with these types of sentences, get one that you feel comfortable using and that you know you can use every time without a mistake, and then introduce that into your writing. And finally, here are a few devices that you can also use to create more complex sentences. I'm sure a lot of you use this not only, but also. It's quite a useful device. So overcrowded cities not only affect the ability to travel easily, but also damage health, etc. So with these kinds of sentences, you just need to make sure that you manage the verbs and the singular plurals properly. Another one is the comparison as. So here we are. Low-cost airlines are just as detrimental to the environment as they are to the health of those who live around airports. So another simple but effective way. The reasons for this, so this is your evidence, so you've stated your point and now you're giving evidence, and by using firstly, secondly, finally, you can build up a rather more complex sentence. And here's an example with firstly and secondly. Smoking must be banned in public places, and the reasons for this are twofold. So you've told us there are 2 reasons, and then you enumerate the reasons in the second sentence. Firstly, blah, 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 and secondly, whatever the second reason is. So see how you can build up these more interesting and complex sentences. And finally, the more is another way of creating a longer and more complex sentence. The more people ignore the dangers of unhealthy diets, the more their health will start to suffer. Okay, so just using one or two of these in your writing will help you to make sure that you include those all-important complex sentences. But remember, not every sentence must be complex. It needs to be a combination of simple and complex. But if you don't have them in your writing, then you will not be able to achieve Band 7 and 8. So here are 6 very simple ways of creating complex sentences, and if you include one of each, then you'll certainly have enough to help you get that Band 7. Okay, so let's leave that there now. I have written an article about this, and you can find the article, which has a little bit more detail, on my website, IELTSlearningtips.com. And if you go there and sign up, you can also get a couple of videos and some other free resources that are available there. And please tell your friends about these short videos. They are aimed especially at people who are looking for Band 7 and 8, and I hope that the tips will be helpful to you in your IELTS preparation. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video.